Filmspotting is presented by Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the show description and use code FILMSPOT25, that's FILMSPOT25, to receive your discount. This episode of Filmspotting is sponsored by Soundstripe. Soundstripe has the best royalty-free music for all of your content. With over 10,000 songs and sound effects, curated playlists, and a new AI song editing feature, it's fast and easy to find and edit any track for your project. Get started with a free Soundstripe account at soundstripe.com/filmspotting and save 10% with code FILMSPOTTING10. That's soundstripe.com/filmspotting and code FILMSPOTTING10.
What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting, celebrating our 20th year. I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenar.
Could you answer the next series of questions without blinking your eyes?
Yes.
Without fear and hesitation. Answer as quickly as you can.
Sure.
This week, our best of the century conversation continues with our favorite actors and actresses of the last 25 years.
And we're going to do it master style, Josh. No fear, no hesitation, and no blinking. Also, it's a draft.
Plus, our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon continues with 1979 Stalker. It's all ahead.
Starting now. If you blink, we go back to the start.
On Filmspotting.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome to Filmspotting, narrowing down the films of the century to 25, which we did last week, Josh, was a chore. Picking 5, only 5 of our favorite actors and actresses of the century. This is only going to end in failure and disappointment, right?
Failure is a strong word. Disappointment. I have a theory that there's a path where we can both come away pretty happy.
Okay.
There may be 2 names we're going to be tussling over. But I don't know. I think we could come away not too disappointed. We'll have to see.
We will see. I'm guessing we won't tussle too much over 1979 Stalker, the 4th film in our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon. We start with our draft. We're going to make this more concise and call it the Actors of the Century Draft. Josh, actors, actresses, all eligible. Producer Sam hates it when I say performers of the century.
Yeah, not a fan.
The only real rule here is we only get to choose 1 Chris each.
Was the Chris's our first draft ever? Or was that just a ranking?
It was just a ranking. Yeah, not a draft.
Okay.
That would have been a pretty short draft, right?
A 2-person draft.
How this is going to work and really why we're even doing it as a draft is pretty simple. Are we trying to sports ball this thing? Not really. 1, it ensures 10 unique choices. No overlap. That's the main thing. And then it's film spotting. The stakes, when I don't know if I'm going to get my next pick, it really does change everything. That's why we're doing it that way. Now, did you have any criteria as you set about to prepare for this draft, Josh?
I did use, as has been mentioned, our best of the 2010s list as a starting point, but the more I got into it, it wasn't entirely helpful because a lot of the actors on that list, I wouldn't say it was recency bias, but just working with only those 10 years, we did that in 2020, you know, it did obviously weigh heavily on people who we were excited about then and are excited about moving forward or were in 2020. So here I had to think about an entire body of work, not looking ahead so much. Okay. It's this particular period. And I thought about this, speaking of sports balling, in the NBA, you have the MVP, Most Valuable Player Award, and that is a regular season award. It's will be announced, I think, within this week during the playoffs. But really, the idea is to look at what the players have done during that season, not their playoff potential or even how they've performed in the first week or so of the playoffs. So I had to think about it similarly. Is that body of work from 2000 to 2025? And then this length of time, 25 years, I found for me absolutely benefited the vets. You know, those who had been doing it pretty much right from 2000 and sustained it up through the last couple of years. That narrowed things down pretty quickly for me for the actors and actresses who I needed to have on my team in this draft.
So I also look back at my list of the top 10 actors of the decade from 2020. Of course, I also had the actors of the decade, or whatever we called it, from the 2000s, the first part of this 21st century. We did that in 2010 on Filmspotting, just before you joined the show. Back in 2020, my criteria was these actors and actresses had to have at least 3 great performances. I approached it this time as a Mount Rushmore. I needed to envision 4 characters' faces that would define the period, this entire 25-year period for that performer. And then I had to consider to what extent that quartet of faces might define the period itself. I get to have the first choice. We didn't do anything convoluted here. We didn't have any ping pong balls or bring in Ernst & Young or Price Waterhouse. We just alternated. The last time we had a draft, I think it was our 2025 movie preview, and you got to go first.
Right, yeah. Yep.
So now I get to go first.
I think it's fair. I do think for our next draft, we got to shake it up, though. I do like the suspense of seeing who's going to get, especially, again, seeing what happened in the NBA, the chaos that was unleashed. We always want more chaos on this show, Adam. Mm-hmm. So moving forward, we'll have to go back to that. But yeah, for tonight, first pick goes to you. It's only fair. I think I know where you're going to go.
Really?
But again, here's where the strategy comes into play, because I honestly think there are only 2 or maybe 3 names we both would love to have on our team. And are you going to try to snatch one of those? Or are you just going to claim who you absolutely have to have, not taking any risks here?
I ended up going the latter route because I really couldn't figure you out, Josh. I didn't have enough intel to go on. As you noted, yes, that list back in 2020 is somewhat helpful, but once you add in not only the past 4 years, you add in the first part of this quarter century, it really does change the game. And I guess I didn't feel like I had a really strong sense of who your top 1, 2, 3 performers of the past 25 years were. And so I stopped overthinking it and decided to go with my heart. I'm picking who is genuinely my number 1 choice, even though I feel like he wouldn't have been your number 1 choice. And from a strategic standpoint, I'm probably misplaying it. You mentioned that you look back and you didn't really consider at all moving forward whether or not these performers would be in our lives, what kind of performances they might give us in the future. Sadly, that's very much the case with my number 1 choice. I am going with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh.
Recently, just a day or 2 ago, Josh, got an email from a listener, Nate Dean, who said, Adam, I can't believe you have William Miller as your profile pick on Letterboxd, but failed to put Almost Famous in your top 25 films of the century. Almost Famous is my favorite film of all time, so I'm kind of offended. Please change your profile pick. Nate, I hear you. I feel you. I will not change my profile pick. It has been my profile pick since profile picks existed, really, in the wake of me seeing Almost Famous originally in theaters back in 2001. I'm going to try to make up for it a little bit here. Philip Seymour Hoffman was my number 2 actor of the 2000s on that list in 2010. And Josh, even though this is how great Philip Seymour Hoffman is, even though we lost him in 2014, I do believe he is still worthy of the number 1 choice. Here's the Mount Rushmore. Lancaster Dodd, The Master. In 2020, I suggested that processing scene, which we heard at the top of the show, was maybe the scene of the decade, him and Joaquin Phoenix. Number 2, Capote, in Capote, for which he won the Oscar. Nate, here it is. Number 3 on the Mount Rushmore, a supporting turn, Lester Bangs and Almost Famous. And then rounding out the Mount Rushmore, I'm going to go with Caden Cotard from Synecdoche, New York. And if you want more lead performances, Josh, great. How about Lumet's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead opposite Ethan Hawke? A Most Wanted Man is a really good film. I don't love The Savages or Doubt, but I have nothing against Philip Seymour Hoffman's performances in either. And the thing about Philip Seymour Hoffman, and we talked about this back when we paid tribute to him after his passing, you can talk about those lead performances, but it's so much fun to talk about how good he is in his supporting turns. Like Spike Lee's 25th Hour, Your Beloved Punch Drunk Love, Mattress Man Dean Trumbull. How memorable is he there? How much of a memorable scoundrel is he even in something like Red Dragon as Freddie Lowndes? Gust in Charlie Wilson's War. I mean, it's a mostly forgettable movie, but he's not forgettable. I still get served scenes from that movie occasionally on Instagram, and I watch them every time if they're a scene that Philip Seymour Hoffman is in. And then he even brings the heat to something like the Hunger Games franchise or another franchise, playing the baddie in Mission Impossible 3.
That was you in the bathroom.
And you're going to tell us everything. Every buyer you've worked with, every organization.
What the hell is your name?
Names, contacts, inventory lists.
You have a wife, girlfriend?
It's up to you how this goes.
Because you know what I'm going to do next? I'm going to find her. Whoever she is, I'm going to find her and I'm going to hurt her.
I'm going to hurt her. Josh, I watched that scene again today, just trying to put my finger on what Hoffman is doing there that makes it so special, that makes it something you do remember. That exact line reading, it's something about the nonchalance. It's something about even a hint of petulance. It's like he can't believe this guy. He keeps asking Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt. What's your name? It's like he just can't believe this guy has the audacity to question him, to capture him, to tie him up like this. And he is sure he is going to pay him back for this. It's not the performance or the movie that will define Philip Seymour Hoffman's career or this period, but it is one I love.
I'm going to ask you one more time.
What's your name?
What is a remittance for?
Who are you?
And who's the buyer?
You don't have any idea what the hell's going on, do you? I mean, you saw what I did to your little blonde friend at the factory, right? Oh, that was nothing. That was fun.
I'm glad you got who you really wanted. He was not at risk, however. I
had a feeling.
I did look at his filmography quite closely. Definitely an honorable mention. I understand the pick. For me, it all came down to the pre-2010 work because as much as I admire what he does in The Master and yeah, like you said, very good in Hunger Games, that just wasn't enough for me to have him on my previous list. So the titles that gave me pause among the ones you mentioned where I thought, ooh, I've really got to think about this are, yes, Almost Famous, absolutely Punch Drunk Love, and probably, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, for sure. Those 3 are the ones that almost pushed him into my consideration to be on my board, but decided I had other performers I preferred. And you've now put me in a difficult but enviable position because I have the opportunity to take my first choice as you did or really grab the person. There's one person who I think we both want.
Okay.
I do not have this person in the first slot on my draft board. So I realize if I take the person I need, I'm going to give you your 1 and 2.
And I don't know, quite frankly, which option I'd rather have you choose at this point.
You know what? I'm going to follow you following your heart, Adam.
Okay.
And I'm going to go.
What a sweet episode.
With the actor who I have ranked first. It was the person who, when I realized we were doing this expanse, this 25 years, I thought, I've got to check out the filmography because I bet it is packed. And though it wasn't necessarily someone I had on the previous list or very high, I don't think I had on the list, I just had a feeling that if you add those 10 years to what has been done in the past 15, you're going to have a powerhouse. And you do. You have Cate Blanchett. Had to have Cate Blanchett.
In my top 5.
Again, it was the research that confirmed it. This is not black bag recency bias. Look at this track record and look at this range. This is the thing with her. Tour de force dramas that I would argue she carried on her back. Like, she made the movie. Blue Jasmine, Where Do You Go, Bernadette? People probably forget that one, but she is a force in that one. And then Tar. She is Tar. So you have that category. Also, I think this is how she came to be known as this arresting figure in historical dramas or period pieces. I think you could put Carol in this category, The Aviator, The Good German, speaking of Soderbergh, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I like more than most people, Nightmare Alley falls here, and Elizabeth, her breakout, doesn't fit our time frame, but Elizabeth, the Golden Age does, and she is different in that film, but equally impressive. Cate Blanchett can also do sci-fi and fantasy. She can be Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. She can be the stepmother in Cinderella. I love that performance. And of course, Hela in Thor Ragnarok. Fizzy fun. You could put Thor Ragnarok in that category, but I'm thinking more here about Ocean's 8, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Sure, why not? I like that movie more than most people, and she's amusing in it.
She is.
And then here's the topper, is all of that are things you can envision. That is what a great actor would do. Performances like these, maybe not one. That'd be a lot to ask of one. She does that. Then she gives us something that I can only call experimental, her Bob Dylan, and I'm Not There.
Well, is it your belief then that folk music has perchance failed to achieve its goals with the Negro cause or the cause of peace?
You know, saying cause of peace is just like saying, just like a hunk of butter. You know, I don't know how you can listen to anybody who wants you to believe is dedicated to the hunk and not the butter.
I'm not sure I follow.
You know, I didn't come out of some cereal box.
This is like, I mean, irreproachable, and the range, the vastness of it, the consistency of it, the fact that she was doing this in the first couple years of this century and just dropped black bag on us. I had to take her at number 1.
Yeah, I had her at number 5, and depending on how this shook out, it wasn't a lock that I would take her if she was still there, because I've got some amazing choices right behind her. But the Mount Rushmore, Tar, of course, Carol, and I was wondering when you were going to get to it, Jude Quinn, I'm Not There. I'm not sure if you said this one or not. I don't love this Woody Allen film, but Jasmine, did you say Blue Jasmine?
She's in that category where she carries the movie.
She does.
She makes the movie, right?
She does. That's a top 4 right there. But I also seriously considered putting in her performance as Daisy in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, as Lilith Ritter in Nightmare Alley. I love that movie. I think it made my top 10 of that year. And you mentioned a few others like The Life Aquatic, like Lord of the Rings, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And I'm not sure if you mentioned this one either, but she's really good in Notes on a Scandal as well.
One I don't think I've seen. Yeah.
So Cate Blanchett is a fantastic choice. She is off the board. The pick does come back to me. Now I have to decide whether or not to take the person that I have at number 2. Do we keep the sweet sentiment going here, Josh? Do we continue to play nice, or do I take the person that I think you think that we both want? And you're about to speak. Go ahead.
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
I don't want to nudge you either way.
So here's the thing. The person that right now I have at number 2 is just ahead of the person I think you think we want. And that person at number 3, I had at number 1 at various points throughout my day. So I really don't feel like I'm being that rude if I take this person at number 2 instead. And I'm going to add to my reasoning that I kind of have a feeling that my number 2 choice may not be in your top 5. So I have to go With my number 2 pick, someone I called back in 2020 the chameleon collaborator, Tilda Swinton.
Aha. Proceed.
Not the pick.
I have Tilda. I also had her on my top 10.
Okay, but not the one.
But here she is an honorable mention.
Wow.
And I can explain why, but definitely gave her consideration. Go ahead. I think it's a completely reasonable pick. How did she stick around for you?
So the Mount Rushmore is so hard because there's so many movies and so many good performances. You almost have to break it up in terms of directors, collaborators that she's worked with. You've got the Wes Anderson side, Asteroid City, French Dispatch, Grand Budapest, Moonrise Kingdom, Isle of Dogs. You've got the Luca Guadagnino movies like I Am Love and A Bigger Splash. Suspiria, not a huge fan. Really like her in that film. The Jim Jarmusch films like Limits of Control, The Dead Don't Die, Only Lovers Left Alive. As I say those 3 titles, I'm not totally sure I actually have seen The Limits of Control, so we can strike that. But I have seen Only Lovers Left Alive and The Dead Don't Die, and they're both wonderful films. The Coen Brothers, Hail Caesar, a movie we both like. You love, I like quite a bit. I really appreciate her in Burn After Reading. Add to that the Bong Joon-ho performances in Okja, Snowpiercer, her collaborations with Joanna Hogg in Eternal Daughter and The Souvenir Parts 1 and 2. And then, of course, if she hasn't made enough of a mark on the last 25 years, you have her appearing and performing quite well in various MCU installments. She's also so great in, how about these titles, Josh? I haven't even said yet. The David Fincher film, The Killer. We Need to Talk About Kevin. The Deep End from 2001, the movie she won an Oscar for. Best Supporting Actress, Michael Clayton. So I'm going to have a little bit of a mea culpa here. Michael Clayton didn't make Madness, didn't even make the shortlist for Madness. Probably should have. It's a movie that a lot of people really revere. And I do love her performance in that film. I don't think it's a matter of going against type necessarily, because I don't think Tilda Swinton has a type.
No.
You can look at a movie like The Deep End, where she plays a mom, an everyday mom, trying to protect her son. In something like We Need to Talk About Kevin, she's a mom trying to figure out how to live with her son. She does play, quote unquote, normal characters. In both of those cases, and I just picked 2 where I can recall her playing those kind of everyday characters, she is playing different forms of desperation. But there's something entirely different about her Karen Crowder and Michael Clayton, a woman who is herself always performing, always projecting an image of control in a corporate world that seems to demand it. And that big scene with Clooney at the end, I love the moment just before it. She's putting this proposal before the board. She walks out the door, and there's nothing really smug about it, but there's just kind of a little bit of self-satisfaction on her face. Like, I geared myself up for this moment and I did it. I delivered. And she's walking with a precision, and she brushes kind of at her jacket, kind of you pull it down behind you, just making sure you're prim and proper and everything is perfect. And then you watch her get confronted by Clooney. And the way she, throughout that entire exchange, tries to calculate the right next move, I'd say it's like a robot short-circuiting, except Swinton makes Karen all too human.
It's a drag. I got 1,000 of these things. What the hell am I going to do with them?
I'm calling Marty.
Good. Do it. That's a great place to start. Let's find out who told him that Arthur was calling Anna Kaiserson. Let's find out who tapped those phones.
This memorandum, even if it's authentic, which I doubt, I highly doubt.
I know what you did to Arthur.
It's protected. It belongs to you, North.
I know you killed him.
It's a cut and dry case of attorney-client
See,
privilege.
now that's just not the way to go here, Karen. For such a smart person, you really are lost, aren't you?
This conversation is over.
And I love that line. For such a smart person, you really are lost, aren't you? And man, that's what Swinton plays when she's playing Karen Crowder. That last scene really is as rewatchable a scene as there is from the 2000s, thanks to both Tilda Swinton and George Clooney. Oh, you know what else I haven't mentioned? She's in 3,000 Years of Longing, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Adaptation, Wonderfully Funny in Trainwreck. She's in Vanilla Sky, Memoria, and Mike Mills' Thumbsucker. There are others. Those are just all movies I like.
Yeah, the filmography is incredible. Michael Clayton is the title that almost pushed her onto the board for me because it was all about the pre-2010 work. As I said, she was my number 8 in the best of the 2010s. So there's nothing to complain about her work she's been doing since. Michael Clayton, Burn After Reading, I think you mentioned prior to 2010, Adaptation. These are the ones that stood out to me. Broken Flowers, The White Witch in Narnia.
Oh yeah, Broken Flowers. I didn't say that. Another good Jarmusch.
Yeah, the Jarmusch, very good. And I don't know if this is fair. It probably isn't because I have another person I hope I get who also does, works often in smaller parts, but that's something that sort of held me back for this list. And then I just have in my notes here, may have hit her stride post 2010 ? Which I know applies. Post 2010 applies. And that's quite a stride. So as you were going through all those titles, the regret was definitely seeping in. But hey, I came here with her as an honorable mention. So I'm not going to regret it all that much.
Okay.
I'm going to grab him. I can't believe you didn't grab him.
Yeah.
How is Joaquin Phoenix here?
So Joaquin Phoenix somehow is
let me be clear. He's not here.
Off my board.
He's off everybody's board because I just took him.
You just took him. It's crazy because he was my number 1, and that was a slam dunk number 1 back in 2020.
Yeah. And
nothing's really changed either, as far as my perception of him, to be honest.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. And as I was describing how I thought about Tilda Swinton, it was very similar for him. Unimpeachable in the section, the work where we considered last time, the period we considered last time. I don't even know if we talked much about Come On, Come On. I love him as Joker. I think that only adds to his credibility for me. But let's look at prior to 2010. I feel like that period, there's not only a lot of films here that show his promise, obviously much younger then. I think he has films that delivered on that promise already. To Die For. I mean, this is where everyone came to recognize that there was something special here. Gladiator, maybe not an amusing performance. I don't know if you would put it on that Rushmore you've been talking about, but I do like it as a pivot from To Die For and just, kind of jumping into big blockbuster and kind of grabbing it in a way, making his scenes his own for sure.
Now the judges just want to be sure you're not counting To Die For in the 2000s.
To Die For is, remind me what
it's in the 90s. It's like 95.
Oh, never mind. Okay. Strike that from the record.
Everything you said still stands. But
yeah, but I don't know if that would that have, no, I don't think that would have swayed me because I also really like his work with James Gray. So we're talking about The Yards, We Own the Night, Two Lovers. And then, it was brief, but his collaborations with M. Night Shyamalan in Signs and The Village, probably some of the, if you set aside The Sixth Sense, some of the best acting done in a Shyamalan film. I really think he's quite strong in Walk the Line, even though that's not my favorite genre of film. You can usually get really strong performances from it, and Phoenix gave one in Walk the Line. So yeah, for me, you add that to stuff like I'm Still Here, The Master, Her, Inherent Vice, Joker, and Come On, Come On. Yeah, gotta have them. Glad I do.
Well, I got a couple songs I wrote in the Air Force. You got anything against the Air Force? No? I do. I hear the train a-comin', it's rollin' round the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison.
Yeah, fantastic choice. And he was one in that mix. When I said that Cate Blanchett, I had at number 5, but I had kind of 2 other choices that when it got there, would I really pull the trigger or would I go in a different direction? He was one of those names. The Mount Rushmore is pretty clear. Freddie Quell, The Master. I think Doc Sportello, Inherent Vice. obviously his character in Her. And then it gets really difficult because you've got a character like Joe and Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here. I love him as Leonard in James Gray's Two Lovers, which you mentioned. I know a lot of people would put Joker probably in the mix, or perhaps in Come On, Come On. The fact is, there are a lot of good choices. Maybe, Josh, since 2020, when I look at the titles, other than Come On, Come On, it's Joker, Joker 2, Beau is Afraid. Joker might have been 2019, so just before 2020, but Joker 2, Beau is Afraid, and Napoleon, I guess, didn't do a ton to raise Phoenix in my estimation, but then he really didn't need to be raised.
And I probably like some of those performances more than you.
Exactly. So. Okay. I am going to go with my third choice.
If I can get past this pick, I will have everyone I want to have.
Okay. So here's the one that either is someone you, of course, have on your list, because when you think about the Mount Rushmore of actors, period, certainly living, but living or dead, this is a name that's going to come up. This is a name that's going to come up in the conversation in the top 5 or 10. But I think you like to look at body of work, and quantity seems to matter to you, Josh, in addition to the quality. And I think that might rule this person out, but it's not going to rule him out.
I know where you're going.
For me, I am going with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes. Yes. Love the pick.
You're happy.
Considered the pick. An honorable mention, not who I was thinking of. Actually, my first honorable mention.
Okay.
So would have gone there. I definitely gave the limited body of work consideration and then said, I don't care. I don't care that he only made, six films in this period, 2 of which I haven't seen. I still don't care. I would have easily taken him if I had to go that direction, and happily so. I get it.
You can see those chiseled faces in The Rock now. Daniel Plainview, There Will Be Blood. Reynold Woodcock, Phantom Thread. Bill the Butcher, Gangs of New York. Still one of the scariest non-horror movie characters ever put on screen. And Abraham Lincoln, Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. If we were just doing an actor's draft, as I was alluding to earlier, like you're drafting a team, you don't know what movie you're going to make, but you know you're going to need talent, Daniel Day-Lewis is probably your number one pick, right? And when you think about those 4 characters, it's hard to come up with more disparate but equally compelling characters than those 4. He is, as I said back when we revisited There Will Be Blood, and I'm sure many others have said about him, to use a cliche, he's a force of nature on screen. And yet he is someone who can do and who does such subtle work. And he's someone who, with every expression and with every line reading, seems to be giving you 3 or 4 different ways to interpret what might be going on in his head. And I think it's such a feat, Josh, to be inscrutable, to inhabit characters that in their own way are inscrutable without being alienating or distancing. And also to be that big as his characters are without being alienating or distancing. You do still have to be drawn to these characters, and he can be distancing. My first time with There Will Be Blood, the calibration was off for me, but it has never been off with that character in that movie since. It's never been off with Daniel Day-Lewis since. I think that is a film and that's a performance that you can recalibrate yourself around. And I know everyone thinks about, I've abandoned my child and I drink your milkshake. But when I think about Daniel Plainview, I think about the oil rig explosion and the urgency to get his son, to bring him to safety. And then not too long after that, the train scene where he does abandon his son, and the anguish, the silent, mostly silent anguish that we see Daniel Day-Lewis's character going through.
You just tell me how to run my family. Might be more important now that you've proven the field and we're offering to buy you out.
One night I'm going to come to you inside of your house, wherever you're sleeping, and I'm going to cut your throat.
Okay, so not much in terms of quantity. I think with those 4 movies and 4 performances, the quality is pretty high. Josh, and you said you hadn't seen the other 2. I have. 9 isn't great, but he's still Daniel Day-Lewis, and he's still entirely watchable and magnetic in that film. And you know what is a really good film that more people should see with another really good performance by Daniel Day-Lewis? The Ballad of Jack and Rose. So you do have 6 movies to go off of, all of which I would recommend seeing for his performances.
Only fair if you've seen all of his films during this period that you should get him in this draft. So that worked out. Okay. Which means I can take the one person that I thought left, at least we might both want, and it's Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. After I realized it wasn't Tilda, I knew it had to be ScarJo because we both had her quite high in 2020.
We did. And the instinct might be to say, well, sure, she's had a great run the last 10, 15 years, but has she been around that long? And actually, she has, because she came to the screen as, I don't know if you'd say a child actor, but a younger teen actor, certainly in The Horse Whisperer. And I remember calling out her performance in that, kind of sitting up and like, who is this kid? And it's only been proven from there. So if you look at her filmography pre-2010, she has The Prestige, Match Point. Here's the big one. Here's the one. The fact that Lost in Translation came in this period for me is probably enough to say, okay, you're still ready for this top 5 in this draft. But yeah, the younger performances are strong. Think about something like a film I like, people have probably forgotten, In Good Company, but Ghost World, which has become something of a cult film. The Coens, The Man Who Wasn't There. She has a smaller part, but is good. And here's what pushed her over the edge, honestly. It's the fact that since 2020, since we did those lists and we both had her on ours, she added Asteroid City, which I think we both had as like one of the best
favorite performances of the year. Yeah.
Of the year. And you know what? Hey, she's a lot of fun in Fly Me to the Moon. So throw that in there as well. But I was a little surprised, honestly, Adam, to see when I sat down and looked at the work outside of that 2010 to 2020 period, and that it resonated, held up, and I wanted to have her on this list too.
I'm not a good mother. I love my daughter, but I'm not a good mother because unfortunately for her, she's not my first priority. On account of there's always already the thing I plan to do next. I love my daughter, by the way. I love all my children. We have a magical time when we're together. I have another girl and a boy. They live with my second ex-husband in Utah. He rarely sees them either. I wish I felt guilty at least, but I don't experience that emotion, if I understand it correctly. I played it, of course.
I don't understand. You never feel guilty in real life?
Not to my knowledge.
I'm looking back at my notes now from 2020, and I mentioned the 3 great performances in 3 great films thing. Josh, I have Marriage Story and Under the Skin and Her.
Incredible, right?
I'm not even listing their Lost in Translation. And let's be clear, I may not love it as much as you and Sam do, but I'm pretty sure I gave it 4.5 stars. And I think her performance is pretty wonderful. So it belongs in that mix. There's a very clear Mount Rushmore there. And I forgot the Ghost World was 2001. I had to look that up. I thought I was going to catch you in another 90s blunder, but no, that's 2001. And yeah, you add Asteroid City into the mix. You've got Hail Caesar in the mix. She is good in those MCU terms.
You did catch me. Horse Whisperer was too early.
Yes, of course.
That was 98.
Yes.
So
yes.
Take that one off the board, but I'm still putting her on my list.
Yeah, it is a wonderful choice. And she was in my top 10 for this draft. It was certainly possible that it would get to her, but you got her with your 3rd choice, which brings me to my 4th pick. And I am going to take the person I have at number 4, an actor whose praises I was singing just last week when we were doing our top 25 films of the century. The actor is certainly one of my favorites, Denzel Washington. Josh, the Mount
I was
Rushmore.
wondering if you'd go here.
Yeah, the Mount Rushmore is Detective Keith Frazier from Inside Man. I don't think Training Day is an incredible film. I think it's a good film. That performance, of course, as Detective Alonzo Harris is charismatic as hell. Flight is a movie I was mixed on, but I think that performance as Whip Whitaker is among Denzel Washington's best. And then I'll go ahead and throw in a movie that is beloved by me and almost nobody else. His turn is Creasy in Man on Fire. There are much more respectable performances to throw in a Mount Rushmore for Denzel, though, from this period. Ben Marco in what I think is a really good remake by Jonathan Demme of The Manchurian Candidate.
It is.
Troy Maxson in Fences. Frank Lucas in American Gangster. His turn is Macbeth in The Tragedy of Macbeth. All of those are good. Great performances. But he is an actor, and I think this is the key. And those are good movies for the most part, right? But the thing about Denzel is he elevates everything he is in. When you have material, and he has made films, I'm going to give you some titles, Josh. When you have material that nobody is going to argue is necessarily great cinema, it still delivers legitimate entertainment because of Denzel Washington and his commitment to the material and to his character. Deja Vu, The Book of Eli, Gladiator 2, The Magnificent Seven. And yeah, Exhibit A would be any/all of the Equalizer movies, which would be otherwise unwatchable. And yet something about the earnestness, the sincerity of that character and the conviction that Denzel Washington brings to those roles makes those movies something, Josh, that at minimum I can watch on an airplane. And you know what? At the very bottom of this list, for an actor I already adore, who's given me performances like Keith Frazier in Inside Man and like Alonzo Harris, that just rounds out what I think makes him so special as an actor.
Don't start crying now. Give me your phone. Right or left?
I don't know what you mean.
Hand it. Are you right or left? Hand it.
Right.
Call 911. You tell them the truth about what happened in here tonight. Your daddy's money's not going to save you this time. You understand?
Yes, sir.
You know her name?
No.
Her name is Amy. Give me your left hand. Give me your left hand.
And yes, I'm leaving out Remember the Titans and John Q because I don't care for them that much, even though, yes, of course, he's Denzel. He's very good in those movies.
Well, that's just it. I'd be tempted to say, he's never been bad, except I haven't seen everything he's done. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a chance he is in something and I avoided it because I didn't have a good instinct about it. But everything you've mentioned, pretty much, he's fantastic in. He was number 7 on my board, so definitely in the mix for me. And you highlighted the ones, I don't think it should be his best actor win in Training Day, but it was really these titles that had him this high for me: Manchurian Candidate, Inside Man, Flight, Fences, The Tragedy of Macbeth, and maybe the poster child for you, what you were talking about, him elevating material, Gladiator 2. Mm-hmm. Such fun in that one. So definitely in consideration for me. All right, so we are up to my 4th pick, which means you only have one left.
That's right.
This is someone I wanted on my board at number 4, but I think it could also be a gift for you, Adam, because I think this will offer you a chance to get someone who might be your last pick. You've been surprising me, though, so maybe not. I'm taking Tony Leung instead of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Mm-hmm.
You can have Leo.
Thank you.
I'm taking Tony. And I think of them as a pair, of course, because Leung was just so good in 2002's Infernal Affairs, which Martin Scorsese remade in 2006 with DiCaprio as The Departed. I do think, I was thinking about this too today, they kind of share a quality in some of their films, not all their films. They can be dreamboat weasels when they want to be. And I love that. I mean, those are my favorite performances of DiCaprio. And I love when Leung has leaned into that as well. Let's focus on him though now, because this is one that, had that instinct of don't forget to look up what he's done in this period. And holy smokes. So Tony Leung gets this era started with, obviously, the one everyone thinks of, In the Mood for Love, and his presence opposite Maggie Cheung there in Wong Kar-wai's masterpiece. I mean, it should be enough to put him on this list on its own. Then in 2002, he was in Zhang Yimou's Hero. This reunited him with Maggie Cheung. They played dueling assassins. It's a martial arts drama, and it's kind of the flip of In the Mood for Love, where they're giving in to all this fiery emoting compared to the subdued nature they had to have in the earlier film. 2002 Infernal Affairs, that same year, as I mentioned. He's the undercover cop, as was Leo. Now, I wasn't as high on Wong Kar-wai's pseudo follow-up to In the Mood for Love, 2046, but Leung is still mesmerizing in it. Ang Lee's Lust Caution, which I think has been forgotten in Lee's filmography, but is an incredibly fascinating erotic spy thriller that Leung is incredible in. We on the show, Adam, reviewed him quite favorably, if I remember, in another Wong Kar-wai film, The Grandmaster. That was 2013. And you know what? He brought more gravitas to the MCU than it probably deserved in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I insist is a very good MCU film. So those are the list of films, Leung films, just the ones I've seen. And if you look at his filmography, there's clearly a lot of non-English language stuff that I need to catch up with. I feel good about this pick just because there is so much more I need to see. And I think anything I choose to watch is only going to bolster my choice. So I'm taking Tony Leung with my number 4 pick.
Good pick. My number 3 actor of the 2000s. And that was largely on the strength of course, Infernal Affairs, a movie I love, and In the Mood for Love. And yes, this is a really nice connection you're making between the two movie stars here. And they do have that connection in terms of the material between Infernal Affairs and The Departed. You are correct, Josh, taking Leo DiCaprio.
There it is.
And I feel really good about it, taking him at number 5, closing out my draft. He was my number 1 of the 2000s. He was my number 3 of the 2010s. Picking a Mount Rushmore was tough. For me, Billy Costigan from The Departed is there. I think that's number 1, even though for a lot of people, it would probably be a different Martin Scorsese performance. It would be Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street. Well, he'd be in my top 3 or 4. And then it's one of those Quentin Tarantino collaborations, Rick Dalton, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it's very tempting to go with another Quentin Tarantino collaboration, Calvin Candy in Django Unchained.
Hey! Lay your palms flat on that tabletop. If you lift those palms off that turtle shell tabletop, Mr. Pooch is gonna let loose with both barrels that sawed off. There have been a lot of lies set around this dinner table here tonight, but that you can believe. Mr. Moody, would you be so kind as to collect the pistol hanging off these boys' hips here?
I think if I'm rounding out that Rushmore, I would go away from Tarantino, I'd go away from Scorsese, and I'd go with Frank Abagnale. I'd go with Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can.
A weasel, a little weasel-y
you're
there.
Right. And a dreamboat too, a pretty dreamy
exactly.
weasel in that film. And I do love that relationship, of course, that father-son relationship that inevitably builds between him and Tom Hanks's character in that film, even though that's not something either of them are consciously looking for. Hugh Glass, his Oscar-winning turn in The Revenant is also very good. You know, I'm not a huge fan of that movie, but you also have Dom Cobb in Inception. You have his performances in other Martin Scorsese movies like Shutter Island, in Gangs of New York. With DiCaprio, I think the only reason maybe he's not higher for me, Josh, is when you look at his filmography. And actually, I wanted to say this about Leung. I think what's hard for me, and you alluded to this a little bit, I just haven't seen so many of his films when I look at IMDb since 2010. And DiCaprio just hasn't made very many movies in the last 5 or 7 years. But the ones he has made Once Upon a Time in Hollywood stands out. Killers of the Flower Moon stands out as another one that I think is a great performance. It does all come back to The Departed for me. And you may recall just maybe a month ago or so here on the show, a little over a month ago, I talked about how that's my comfort food. I was on a plane coming back from my trip to Italy, and I threw in The Departed, and I said there was that one line reading, that scene that I just cannot get enough of, that scene with Vera Farmiga where he is confronting her as a therapist and making her very uncomfortable, basically because he just refuses to allow her to get away with her usual BS that she probably gets away with most cops who come into her office. And he's very confrontational, but also very incisive. And I think it's DiCaprio maybe at his best. I think it's the best scene in the film and one of DiCaprio's best scenes overall. And that line reading about what the policeman signed up for, well, let's go ahead and hear it.
So, do they all come in here and cry, your cops?
Sometimes they do. Yeah, sure. Sometimes they cry, yeah. If they've had trouble at home, if they've had to use their weapons.
Use their weapons? Let me tell you something. They signed up to use their weapons. Most of them, all right? But they watch enough TV so they know they have to weep after they use their weapons. There is no one more full of shit than a cop. Except for a cop on TV.
With your theory, Josh, how about his character in Killers of the Flower Moon? Just full-blown weasel. Right?
Yeah, though, you know, his eventual wife thinks he's quite the dreamboat.
That's true.
She comments on that.
That's true. But maybe the weaseliest of all of DiCaprio's characters. Fair to say?
Fair to say, yes,
okay.
For sure.
Your final choice, Josh.
I don't know if you're ready for this, Adam. I think you're going to want this to be struck from the Filmspotting records. I may be besmirching this whole exercise. I don't know if you saw, but for Filmspotting family members, we have this Discord set up. Yeah. Right?
No, I know where you're going. I'm on board.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was an interesting conversation where should a comic actor be considered for this list? A comic first actor, I think is how we were talking about it. Somebody who's, you know, not a dramatic actor who's been funny in occasional roles, or even a comedian who eventually went for full drama, but someone who was just pure comedy. And a lot of names were thrown out. I considered many of them, some good choices. For me, there was only one realistic possibility.
Okay.
And once I added these up, I just could not stop myself from wanting to draft Will Ferrell.
Really? Okay, that's not where I thought you were going.
I know.
I thought for sure, and I did read that Discord. I thought for sure, you were going a little bit more respectable with John C. Reilly or Bill Murray. And of course, considering your love for Murray and your love for his performances in Wes Anderson films, how is it that you're going with Will Ferrell instead, Josh?
Let me just quickly say about Murray is that, you know, his golden age, though he's done good stuff since, kind of ended around 2015. And in terms of that stuff, that would really put him at the top. He was on my honorable mentions list, though, on my board, would have taken him if I needed to go in that direction. But for Ferrell, you know, Murray is also someone, the movies that we think of him as being great in are also great. And Ferrell, that's not always the case. But this is a list about the performances, Adam. It's not necessarily a list about the movies as a whole. So even if his comedies tend to be uneven on the whole, and I'm going to list some that aren't necessarily all that great, who has had a better run of comic characters since 2000 than these names? And I'm just picturing listeners, I hope, just the smiles growing wider and wider.
Hit me.
With each one. Mugatu in Zoolander.
Yeah.
Frank the Tank in Old School.
Of course.
Buddy the Elf. Ron Burgundy in Anchorman. Chaz, Wedding Crashers. Small part, but crucial to what that movie is all about, Adam. Ricky Bobby, Talladega Nights. He's in the title, for goodness sake, as, you know, so many of these characters are. We get another Chaz Michael Michaels Blades of Glory, Jackie Moon, Semi-Pro. Things are a little sketchy movie-wise there, but great characters. Brennan in Step Brothers. I love Step Brothers. I also love The Other Guys, where he's alongside Mark Wahlberg as Alan Gamble. You know, I mean, I haven't brought this up maybe in 5 years at least, Adam. Casa de mi Padre, Armando. I mean, I haven't forgotten.
That's because I shock you whenever you bring it up.
Rest of the world has forgotten. I have not. President Business, among other parts, in the Lego movie. And of course, his counterpart, Lord Business's cousin, Mattel CEO in Barbie.
Are any women in charge?
Listen, I know exactly where you're going with this, and I have to say, I really resent it. We are a company literally made of women. We had a woman CEO in the 90s, and there was another one at some other time. So that's two right there. Women are the freaking foundation of this very long phallic building.
Your mileage may vary on these. There might be some you like better that I missed. I didn't even mention. That is an astonishing run of ridiculousness.
You forgot Eurovision Song Contest, the story of Fire
that's
Saga.
Another good one. Another good one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, think about that. For an SNL alum to keep this up in all these different ways for over 25 years. Okay, you need some drama in the mix. You need to not feel terrible about this being on the Filmspotting webpage. Be a little bit respectable. He's very good in Stranger Than Fiction.
I've got no apologies, Josh. I'm on board.
Okay, good. And Will and Harper. Let's just throw Will and Harper too. I know it's a documentary. He's playing himself. But yeah, just for being a part of that project, maybe that'll help swing a few folks over to my side, and I won't be entirely pilloried.
Super duper. That's nice. Way to go. Neato, gang. Yes, boy. Ed, that is good news. I'll be honest. That is good news.
That is our actors and actresses of the century so far draft. You can find our complete list anytime you would like at filmspotting.net/list. To quickly review, Josh, hit them with your 5 picks.
Cate Blanchett, Joaquin Phoenix, Scarlett Johansson, Tony Leung, Will Ferrell, and that was my board. I thought we might both come away happy.
Yeah.
I think you are too, right?
Yeah. Philip Seymour Hoffman is my number 1. Tilda Swinton, Daniel Day-Lewis, Denzel Washington, Leonardo DiCaprio. That's my board, other than the fact that I had Blanchett at 5, DiCaprio at 6, and I was going to make a final call between them at the last minute if that choice was there. That choice was not. I have no complaints about my board. We hope you enjoyed this frivolous little exercise. We would love to hear your picks. You can email us feedback@filmspotting.net.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like Filmspotting. There are a couple more things you can do. You could take a minute to give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time listener or you've been listening for 20 years. Every new review helps us reach new listeners. Here's another great way to support us. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. We want to thank family member Adam Graff in Portland, Maine. Adam's letterbox handle is Linus Caldwell 75. Went to check today. And yep, I am following Adam. Speaking of the Discord, the Filmspotting Family Discord, I went through a flurry. I had been behind on people sharing their letterbox profiles. Finally, some time opened up. I just went on there and went through a burst of following. So apologies if you're a family member and I haven't followed you there yet. Hopefully I'll catch up at some point. But yeah, good to follow Adam there as well. Linus Caldwell, 75.
A reference to Ocean's 11, so we must have a Soderbergh fan in our midst. Adam writes about how he found us. I think it was a simple Google search back in 2015 when I was first getting into podcasts and looking for something about movies. His letterbox top 4, Into the Wild, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, In Bruges, and The Tree of Life. Not bad. A favorite movie he revisited recently, Babette's Feast. A random film or filmmaker that you love. Now, this submission came in before the Oscars. Filmmaker, Sean Baker. Film, Cutter's Way. He says, I think the filmmaker and the movie are terribly underrated, but maybe not now with the Palme d'Or win. Yeah, and maybe not now with that Oscar
Just getting
win.
started, actually.
A movie you credit with becoming a cinephile, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, especially watching every second of the bonus features of all 3 extended edition DVDs and getting a sense of how much work and collaboration goes into the craft of filmmaking. Finally, a book about movies or movie making. This was Hollywood, Forgotten Stars and Stories by Clara Valderrama, which helped teach me about some of the unknown aspects of the beginning of Hollywood and led me to watch the greatest dance sequence in all of cinema, which is the performance by the Nicholas brothers with Cab Calloway at the end of Stormy Weather. We thank Adam for being a part of the Filmspotting family and for all of the years of listening. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, your support comes with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get our weekly newsletter. You get exclusive opportunities like being part of the Filmspotting family Discord. You get our monthly bonus shows like the quarterly Filmspotting Advisory Board meeting. We just dropped audio of that into our family members' feeds, and we are just under a week away from recording our May bonus draft with our Filmspotting Madness bracket contest winner, Ricky Kendall. We are doing Dead Directors.
I think there's going to be some more fighting with that one.
Yes.
That's my instinct.
Yes, and we'll wait to reveal the draft order and how we came upon that draft order when we record the show, but let's just say I won't be getting my number 1 choice, probably.
I don't think I will either. We were both way off on our guesses.
We were way off
for that.
You can learn more at filmspottingfamily.com.
Adam, it's almost here. Mission Impossible, Final Reckoning. And I don't think you should be allowed to see a Mission Impossible movie, at least the recent ones, anywhere but a theater. I mean, if any movies have been made to be seen on a big screen for those Tom Cruise stunts, it's this series. With Regal Unlimited, you could see Final Reckoning for free. Regal Unlimited is the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Right now, Regal is offering Filmspotting listeners endless movies for less. If you sign up for Regal Unlimited using code FILMSPOT25, you'll get 10% off a 3-month subscription. Now, Regal Unlimited is the only truly limitless movie subscription pass. You can see any standard 2D movie at any time. There are no blackout dates. There are no restrictions. Also, with Regal Unlimited, you won't just save money on tickets, you'll also save on snacks. Members get 10% off all non-alcoholic concessions. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the description and use code FILMSPOT25 to receive your discount.
Always pleased to talk about Soundstripe. Josh, we're going to get into Andrei Tarkovsky's film Stalker here in a little bit. We're going to talk about the score, this ambient electronic score that's really efficiently used. Let's say you're a content creator. Could be anything that you're producing. TikToks, Instagram videos, long form videos. You need something that feels a little bit like Tarkovsky. Maybe something ambient and electronic sounding. You go to Soundstripe, soundstripe.com/filmspotting. You type in ambient electronic, you get 59 results. Electronic score, chill electronic, dark electronic. Plenty of options for you to check out from their library of over 10,000 high-quality tracks that includes music from Grammy-winning artists. You know the Soundstripe is going to make music licensing hassle-free. With their subscription, you get unlimited access to that vast catalog, downloadable stems for creative flexibility, and one of my favorite features, I like to use Adobe Premiere Pro for all of my video editing. Well, Soundstripe seamlessly integrates to allow for a smoother editing experience within Adobe Premiere Pro. So if you are ready to level up your production game with properly licensed, high-quality music and sound effects, all you got to do is head over to soundstripe.com/filmspotting. You will save 10% with code FilmSpotting10. That's soundstripe.com/filmspotting and use code FilmSpotting10.
Did you show up in Vienna that December?
Did you?
No, I couldn't, but did you? I need to know, it's important to me.
Why, if you didn't?
Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke there in Before Sunset. Next week, Josh, we plan to revisit the second film in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy as part of our ongoing Pantheon project. Yes, All 3 films in that trilogy are currently in the Filmspotting Pantheon, but we have never discussed in depth before Sunset, and we really hadn't discussed before Sunrise either until, that is, our recent Filmspotting Fest. We closed out the fest with a Q&A. Our friend Scott Tobias joined us for that. So next week on the show, you're going to hear that Q&A, but you are also going to hear our conversation about Before Sunset. Now, Before Sunset did not make your top 25 of the century last week. I think I had it at number 2. Should I be worried about your Sunset revisit?
Number 2, bold. No, you shouldn't be worried. It's a wonderful movie. And the question I have that I'm curious about, and I'm eager to watch it again, is will it bump its way even higher? And maybe, as some people have it, supplant Before Sunrise as my favorite in the series, because that seems like a take that, for me at least, it would require some time to get around to. But I can understand after years of not only thinking about these movies, but just living, that you could get there. So yeah, I haven't watched Before Sunset in I don't know how long, and can't wait to do it for this conversation.
More about the Filmspotting Pantheon, which is effectively our movie Hall of Fame, at filmspotting.net/Pantheon. Also next week, we will wrap up our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon with 1983's Nostalgia. For a schedule of future shows, filmspotting.net/episodes. We do have some good stuff coming up that unfortunately you won't be here for, Josh. You're going to be off in Japan having a meetup with Filmspotting listeners.
Yeah, I thought I'd just throw it out there, see what happens. And there's a good group getting together. The list is growing. I mean, we might have to find a new place if we're get to be too big for the place we have planned. So
that's great.
Can't wait to do that. And yeah, just spend a couple of weeks traveling. But unfortunately, ran into Michael Phillips at a screening last night, and he's going to come in. I'm going to miss a couple of good top 5s, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, we're going to do Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, and we are going to do our top 5 movie stunts. So if you have any options that you would like us to be sure not to overlook, send us a note, feedback@filmspotting.net. And then the week after that, how about this? Aisha Harris is going to sit in for a full show. She's going to guest host. And in honor of the 30th anniversary of Clueless, we're going to give that the sacred cow treatment. She wrote about Clueless in her book, Wannabe.
Fun. Yeah, I can't wait for both of those. You probably wouldn't, but just, remember folks like Keaton and Chaplin for your stunts, right? It doesn't have to be the big budget action stuff for those lists. At least that's what I'd want to consider.
Sorry, I've already decided that it's all Fast and Furious.
I mean, that is a completely honorable way to go as well.
Speaking of the Pantheon, as we just were, we did want to note the passing last week of director James Foley. He has a film in the Filmspotting Pantheon. It is 1992's Glengarry. Glenn Ross. Foley also directed a couple of 50 Shades sequels. He directed 1986's At Close Range, starring Sean Penn and Christopher Walken. Somehow, Josh, At Close Range remains a blind spot for me. Maybe in honor of James Foley, I'll finally watch it. Have you seen it?
I don't think so. If I had it, I shouldn't have. I wasn't supposed to.
Sure.
But may have snuck it on VHS, a year or two later at a neighbor's house.
Yeah. Also, he directed the Stalker thriller Fear with Mark Wahlberg, and he directed Madonna in Who's That Girl? R.I.P. James Foley.
And yeah, speaking of Madonna and looking over some of his work, his filmography, if you grew up on Madonna music videos, a handful of those were Foley as well.
I wasn't aware of that.
This week on our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past, they have a new pairing. They are diving back into the MCU with Thunderbolts, and they'll be pairing that with 1999's not-so-superhero movie, Mystery Men, which I think has grown in appreciation over the years. I don't know if it's reached cult status yet, but yeah, I like that one a fair amount when it came out. Will be interesting to hear them talk about it in connection with Thunderbolts. Mystery Men had Ben Stiller, Hank Azaria, William H. Macy, Greg Kinnear. So pretty solid cast there, pretty fun film. New episodes of The Next Picture Show drop every Tuesday, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, there's not a word or a sentence or a concept that you can illuminate for me. There is one singular reason I keep coming here.
Truman?
November 14th, 1959. 3 years ago. 3 years. And that's all I want to hear from you.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, Oscar nominated 3 times for Best Supporting Actor. Josh didn't win for any of those, but he did win Best Actor for that role. Capote back at the 2007 Oscars. He was my first choice in our Actors of the Century draft. Now that we've done the hard work of narrowing down the best actors and actresses of the last 25 years, it is our listeners' turns. It's poll time. We got 5 picks each. They only get 1 pick, and they've got 6 options to choose from. However they want to do it. The best actor or actress, definitive actor or actress of the last 25 years, their favorite. They can go however their heart leads them. The options are, we went with 3 each from our lists.
Yeah, 3 from each of our lists. And also, if you think we were misguided, there is the other category. But the names are Cate Blanchett, Leonardo DiCaprio, Daniel Day-Lewis, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Scarlett Johansson, and Joaquin Phoenix. So give it some thought, look at those filmographies, and vote in that poll. Also, leave a comment. You can do that at filmspotting.net.
This message is brought to you by Abercrombie Kids, where the activewear is made for every summer activity, so your mini-me can bring their personal best. Summer days are always an adventure, from day camp to rec leagues and pool days. Abercrombie Kids has the shorts, tees, and swim to keep them comfy and keep up with them. Get everything for the entire summer at Abercrombie Kids. Shop in-store, online, or in the app.
Зона — это очень сложная система ловушек, что ли? И все они смертельны.
That's from Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, which was released in 1979. It's the 4th film in our Tarkovsky Blind Spots Marathon. Our mission with this marathon, to complete the Russian master's filmography. I think, Josh, you're now already there.
I'm there. I can say I've seen them all, and I only need to see each of them 10 more times to feel like I've wrapped my arms around them.
I've got 1 more to go. The Filmspotting Marathons, which we do once or twice a year, are our opportunities to fill in cinematic blind spots. We've done marathons dedicated to directors like Tarkovsky, to genres, to various countries or region-specific cinemas. We both had a couple of Tarkovsky films we needed to catch up with, including, for me, this week's film, which is not just my biggest Tarkovsky blind spot, but among my biggest cinematic blind spots, period. Stalker did come to theaters in 79, but mostly in what was then the USSR. It didn't make it to the US until the early 80s and earned its reputation thanks to art house screenings throughout the decade. When Sight and Sound expanded its once-a-decade greatest films of all time list from a top 10 to a top 100 in 1992, Stalker made the list at 41, one of 3 Tarkovsky movies to make the cut. Curiously, it missed the list in 2002. Tarkovsky's Solaris made it for the first time instead, but it was back in the top 50 in 2012, and it came in at number 43 on the most recent list in 2022.
Stalker is based loosely on the 1972 Russian novel Roadside Picnic, which was about the aftermath of an extraterrestrial visit. Here, it follows a man, a guide played by Alexander Kadanovsky, who risks arrest and imprisonment to lead a small group through a dangerous area known as the Zone. Inside the Zone is the Room, this mythical place that has the reputation of being able to fulfill your greatest desires. So, Adam, this was the title that I think absolutely drew you to this marathon. And I have already suggested in previous shows that based on the movie's metaphysical sci-fi premise, it's similar to the spirit of Tarkovsky's 1972 Solaris, a movie you do love. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait. This has also been the moment for me of the marathon, is getting to hear from someone who just watched Stalker for the first time what they made of it. Because I don't think it's as dense as some of the Tarkovsky films we've watched or even discussed on this show. Take Mirror, for example.
I've got it all figured out. Sure.
I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm not saying that. But I think I'm just excited because I do think it's one you can come away from a first viewing with and having at least a concrete reaction to. So what's yours?
Solaris still carries the mantle as my favorite sci-fi Tarkovsky and favorite Tarkovsky period.
Okay.
It's the one that stirs me both intellectually and emotionally the most. We'll see if that changes with one blind spot remaining next week here as part of the marathon. But I do understand the reverence for Stalker because I just finished it earlier today and I still feel like I'm a bit in its trance. Despite its slowness and often its stillness, Tarkovsky's tracks pull you and his trio inexorably forward. If we ever do a top 5 movies that demand you get on their rhythm, Stalker is a lock. Because not only is it precise in its deliberation, but the sound design features the recurring sound of a train chugging along at a reasonable pace. So there's this near constant thrum just kind of carrying you along. And I said inexorably because there is a sense of inevitability from the opening scene and of obsession, Josh, that reminded me of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I know it. I know. I don't know why it never struck me this way before.
It did this time, though. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, right away.
Coincidentally, was released at the end of 77, and Tarkovsky started shooting this film early in 77, so definitely wasn't an influence, but something was in the air back in 77. What prompted that thought was that opening, that haunted, emotionless look on Stalker's face as he walks out on his wife and child. She's pleading with him to stay, and he is absolutely determined to go. And his line is, "I'm imprisoned everywhere." She says, "You're going to go back to prison." He says, "I'm imprisoned everywhere." At this point, we don't, as viewers, know anything really about what this zone is or what his job is. But the implication is that if he's not doing whatever it is he's setting out to do, if he's not there, then he's in a metaphorical prison, kind of like Roy Neary, who has to chase his vision. Ironically, of course, you mentioned the book Roadside Picnic. I learned later that that book does directly address what this film never does, which is that it was this extraterrestrial event, supposedly. It was aliens who caused this dystopian landscape to come about and presumably the creation of the zone. There are no aliens, or as I recall, mentions of aliens in this film. But how fortuitous, Josh, was it that our marathon jumped from Andrei Rublev 13 years over The Mirror and Solaris, movies we had both seen before, to this one where Tarkovsky continues his aggrandizement of Holy Fools.
Yeah. God's fool.
I hope I would have processed this on my own, but Tarkovsky did it for us. The writer says to Stalker near the end of the film, "You are simply one of God's fools." And at the end of the movie, in that really stunning address to the camera, his wife says, "He's one of God's fools." And one of the things that stands out to me about Stalker isn't just that he so clearly is a holy fool, someone society would deem foolish. And he's someone driven by his faith, who unreservedly and unequivocally believes he has a calling to give people hope when they most need it. It's how Tarkovsky asks us to believe along with him, which I want to dig into, but I want to get your thoughts on Stalker first.
Yeah, I love all that. The Close Encounters thing is great, though I think it's also important to note the distinction, particularly as it applies to the Stalker. You know, eventually we discover, and you were touching on this, I would say Roy Neary is more of a seeker. He's, in some ways, he's more aligned to the writer or the professor on this journey. And whereas the Stalker is more of a guide, and that's where the holy fool, God's fool, that all comes in. So yeah, definitely had that on my mind, and it was kind of fascinating. I think the sound design, I'm glad you called that out as well. This is a very quiet movie, so it's not necessarily the thing that first comes to mind. There's almost no music, very little music, but those effects you're talking about are so instrumental. And the one thing that stood out to me is note that the first sign we get that something is different in this zone is audible. It's a cue. They're on this rail car, on those railroad tracks, and we hear those click of the tracks, right? That sort of monotonous lulling thing. But then you also get, and this is before they've gone very far, this weird metallic echoing that follows them. And it's just communicating that this is a different space. It has its different rules, different sounds, different feelings. And so, yeah, the sound design is absolutely key here. And just to go back to this figure of the stalker, I also want to give a little time to something maybe we wouldn't discuss otherwise, the performances and Alexander Kadanovsky in this lead role, because I remembered him as this striking figure. Very pale, he's got this cropped hair. He's almost like a human, not yet fully formed in some ways. And I was thinking about, does this apply to his sort of seeking, but also guiding? But I was struck about, what a charismatic is maybe too strong of a word, but an arresting figure he is in this film, because he's not just this stoic guide. He's eager and almost giddy. What does he say when they first arrive in the zone? Home at last. This speaks to his passion.
And he lays down in the grass.
Yes, he's
in the weeds.
He's following through on what he told his wife. He's feverish to get away from them, but not because of them, but because of where he needs to be. So I liked that quality to the performance. I liked how he gets agitated when the writer and the professor aren't showing the proper commitment.
Yeah, when they don't behave, which is a word he uses, at least in the subtitles. Yeah.
And how irate he is at the end of the film about their lack of belief. And, this God's fool thing is interesting because the writer says it with disdain. His wife in that incredible monologue where she's looking directly at the camera, I feel like she's saying it with more of a note of, I don't know if it's admiration or it's understanding, I would say. It's empathetic understanding more than she showed him in the beginning when he abandoned them. Clearly she was not approving of it then. And then she makes this interesting comment about, how without sorrow, there cannot be hope.
Right. Or happiness, she says first, and then no hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's bringing us to this, this giant idea, maybe we'll tiptoe towards at some point, of what is the room offering? What is the room? What's the room? And that is sort of her theory shared with his theory, I think. But yeah, I think the form of this, as you were saying, it is one of those, you have to be on its rhythm. But for me, and why I would recommend it as a entry point, possibly also with Solaris, for someone new to Tarkovsky, is because it does have this propulsive narrative framework of this fascinating place you want to explore, a goal to get to, and then the aftermath of once you're there. And so that really does carry you through what is a nearly 3-hour movie with long conversations, an incredibly patient camera. And to me, it was more gripping than I had expected. It's been a long time since I'd seen it, and I was settling in for something that was more meditative, perhaps. And I found it, just incredibly gripping. And one more thing to throw out there at you before we can go wherever you want to go. But I was struck as well by this. The camera work made me think of this. It is a relatively still camera, even for Tarkovsky, because production design seems to be at the forefront here. It is in so many of his movies, and Tarkovsky got a production design credit along with Alexander Boym. The interior of these rooms, especially outside of the zone, looking charred. Inside the zone, these spaces are, water's everywhere, of course. There's decay, but balanced with growth. And these static shots of the characters in these spaces, it's almost like they're moving through art installations. And this was stage-like in some ways, made me think of something like, Beckett's Waiting for Godot in sort of the material, but also the staging and the recreation of these spaces. I had forgotten that as well, that it's a very still movie, even in terms of the camera work. Yeah. But not dull for me at all.
I want to go back to what I was saying about the faith I think Tarkovsky demands of us as viewers. And you were talking about the zone. And I think the zone itself is a huge part of it, and the room within it. Until the very end, there's one shot where we don't see the exact room, but we get the idea of the location it's housed in. The Stalker, I've been calling him Stalker. I'm probably going to stick with that. Stalker references it. It's right over there. But otherwise, we don't really see the room. It's withheld from our sight. Even when they can turn and look at it, the camera doesn't show us until the very end, of course, when the camera finally goes into the room. But the entire movie, Josh, how do we know? How do we know that the room can actually perform the miracles that Stalker claims it does? We don't know. We can't know. And I mention Close Encounters. I imagine when Alex Garland's Annihilation came out in 2018, or when the book it was adapted from came out in 2014, everyone who had seen Stalker thought, there's some similarities here. That's neither here nor there for me, except in one regard. It's been a while since I've seen Annihilation. But as I recall, when they go into the shimmer, as it's called there, a lot of crazy stuff goes down. All of the things that Stalker says about the zone, how it's impossible to navigate because it's constantly shifting. He says, the moment someone shows up, everything comes into motion. Old traps disappear and new ones emerge. Safe spots become impassable. Now your path is easy. Now it's hopelessly involved. That's the zone. It may even seem capricious, but it is what we've made it with our condition. He makes it sound like it's a video game, as if the land is literally shape-shifting in front of us. That's more applicable to a movie like Annihilation. We don't see any of that happen in this film. There are no bizarre or really supernatural occurring, save for possibly two moments, right? Which is when the writer moves forward, even though he's told not to, and he hears a voice. And we're left to wonder, is that a voice inside his head, or is that actually the zone talking to him? And then later, there's a telephone call. There's a telephone call at a place where I'm guessing no one's actually set up a telephone. But other than that, Josh, there's really no special effects. There's no sense of anything within the landscape that's actually alive or shifting. We're just left to believe what Stalker tells us, even when our own eyes, the camera, and other characters' eyes say that, look, where we're going is right there. It's straight ahead. But Stalker's telling us, no, you can't go that way. You have to take a different, much more convoluted route. So I think that's a big part of it, but also it's how Tarkovsky brings us into the world of the zone. And you referenced this with the sound design, but it's that hypnotic ride in the rail car. And the close-ups of the faces, that long ride on the rail car, the close-ups of the faces, the sound along the tracks. Then we get mixed in Edward Artemyev's ambient electronic music clanking around as well. Mm-hmm. He also did Mirror and Solaris. And everything up to this point has been that black and white cinematography that's like a
sepia, I would say. It's almost
desaturated sepia tone. It's like a decaying sepia tone. And suddenly, but still subtly, with one cut, we're in full color.
Yeah.
Lush greens, the blue sky, flowers. It's just in that shot, all of a sudden, we believe that the zone is this enchanted, otherworldly place that Stalker claims that it is. And I think it's also, Josh, and one last thing, how he uses the camera almost like a spectral presence, like when the camera does pull back into the room, otherwise unmotivated, when it lurks around corners, like lurks around trees or the corners of that tunnel, like it's another presence is observing all of this. How about the shot? And I think I referenced this before, when the writer starts walking and, actually, this is the professor later, when the professor's in the lead. It's the shot where we're sure that we're seeing the professor's point of view as he walks along, because in the previous shot, he has just started walking along the path. And then we cut to a shot where clearly the camera is moving, it's handheld, as it looks like a set of eyes is moving along this path. And then all of a sudden, all three characters are ahead of the camera in the shot. It's the shot that occurs through that burned out car, I think, with some bodies inside of it, right? So we think it's the professor's point of view, but then the professor's in front of the camera. It's as if this entire space somehow is alive.
Yeah. Yeah. We could chart and discuss in detail, I don't think we'll have time for it tonight, the use of that sepia and switching to the full color here, because it breaks where you described, but then later on, we'll go back and forth a little bit in snippets that are curious to me. Alexander Kenyazinski is the cinematographer here. But let me go back to what you're talking about with this faith element, because I think you're absolutely right. There is a counter. If someone wanted to argue that this is a film about having faith, an argument about having faith of some sort, you could counter that and say, based on largely what we see, as you've been saying, this could all be mythology built around, let's say, a devastating nuclear accident. And worth noting, as we're placing this in time frame, Chernobyl wasn't till 86. So this is something that maybe, whether it was the novelists or Tarkovsky are thinking about possibilities in the Soviet Union. It's not like this had happened. But yeah, you could counter and say, this is all mythology. That space suffered a devastating nuclear accident. And now to kind of like in the years after, this myth has built up around it. Think about one thing the writer also says, all of this is someone's idiotic invention. And it's the writer, I thought this was interesting, who calls out the Stalker for enjoying the power that selling this mystery gives him. When they really start going at each other near the end, that's exactly how some people see clergy, see the church, right? As just manipulating religious belief for power. So that's definitely, there's enough of that there in this film to allow for that sort of reading. I think that's the part where the writer might also call him one of God's fools. And in his use of it, it's literal fool. It's like you are unintelligent and in this case also taking advantage of us. All that being said, just based on the other Tarkovsky films and especially something like Andrei Rublev, this strikes me when it comes to the faith question as this apocalyptically eerie argument that there's just something more than the material world. And we do get hints of this. I think that incredible shot when they're in that room with the piles of dust, the mounds of dust, a bird comes flying through, and that edit where the bird just disappears mid-flight. In the next shot, the bird comes back, and then we see it land, I think. That's never explained what the heck is going on there, but it's something unnatural to be sure. But for me, it's a through line more that's going across this movie. When we meet the writer for the first time, he's talking to this woman. He's waiting to meet the stalker and lamenting the lack of the metaphysical in the modern world. I think he references ghosts. I think he might even say flying saucers. Doesn't he say something about the Middle Ages, life was more interesting because, there was the potential for the metaphysical. Right. And of course, we could get into the ending here if we want. This is the final shot where we're back outside of the zone, where I believe in the stalker's home with his daughter, who's been called Monkey and has been described as, being a mutant, a zone mutant, something like that. That lends towards the nuclear disaster theory. But here, and this is in color, even though we're in the sepia world here, this is in color. This is where she's been reading a book. We hear the poem read by a woman's voice, but then she just turns and looks at the table and there's a glass of dark liquid there. She stares at it and it begins moving. And you get this, it's hard to describe because what's happening is so simple, but at the end of this film to have this happen, I think it's because it's the revealing of what the film believes reality to be, is that there is something metaphysical and unexplainable. This is the mystery that Tarkovsky's movies are always trying to solve, I feel like, is that she somehow is moving these glasses. She does it 3 times. One falls off the table. And the music, the rare music we hear faintly in the background is Beethoven's Ode to Joy. So all of that adds up to me to be this argument that there is something going on here in this room. That's the question I want to ask you. How did you read what's in the room, if anything? Because there's a counter that there's nothing there.
So for me, it goes back to this question of faith. And I don't think it's cop-out to say that we're not supposed to know. I think that is entirely the point. And I think it's worth noting that having not read really anything about this film, I don't know what the prevailing sentiment is. I don't know what the conventional wisdom is in terms of how the room itself is interpreted, or what the most provocative questions that this film leaves people with are, what some of the larger philosophical questions are that people have really been wrestling with. But I imagine, Josh, that one of those provocations goes back to something the writer says when he decides ultimately that he's not going to go in. Mm-hmm. He says that the room doesn't grant your wish. What the room does is it reveals to you your true nature.
Yeah.
And what you truly wish for, essentially revealing who you really are. But what strikes me about that, Josh, is even that is potentially just the writer's interpretation. And he is a writer after all. So that's his interpretation. That is his invention in the moment. Now, that is based on what he knows about what Stalker has told him about his former mentor, a man known as Porcupine. So he's reading into that in determining that this man ultimately killed himself because he went into the room and he learned something about himself that he didn't want to learn. But that's still his interpretation. At the end of the day, Tarkovsky offers no concrete evidence that that room grants any wishes, your true nature, bags of money, whatever it may be. We have no sense of that one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is completely open to many interpretations, including the counter I was discussing. I do think my sense, or at least my reading, I should say, is that the writer is closer to what's possibly the truth than the room being like a genie in a bottle, right?
It's more interesting, sure.
And that's been the myth. That's why people go. But I do think, yes, it's not only revealing what your deepest desire is, but broader than that, I think the movie is suggesting that the room represents what it means to encounter the divine. And I'm basing that on some other things the Stalker says about the room. He says, I think it lets through all those who've lost hope, not the good or the bad, but the unhappy. And what that led me to think about is those are people who are willing to surrender, to realize they can't save themselves, they're helpless. And part of that surrender is admitting who you are. So if the room reveals who you are, your deepest desire is part of that. It's maybe not the entire thing, but it's definitely part of it. That is kind of submitting to the divine, is to humbling yourself, exposing yourself, and in that somehow finding hope. I think that's what his wife is talking about when she says without sorrow, there is no hope, that you have to admit that. There's maybe an element of confession at play here. Stalker says something else like this is the only place to come when all hope is gone. So that's kind of a release and a surrender idea as well. And yeah, I think there are some other sort of details that support this. There's that whole weird sequence where the three of them are falling asleep just before they get to the room. And the movie, it's maybe lags a bit because you're like, we want to see what happens. And they get drowsy. It's like they're in the field of poppies in The Wizard of Oz. But we hear a woman quote during that passage from Revelation 6, which is this apocalyptic passage about falling before the face of God. Stalker later quotes the story, the New Testament story of the disciples encountering the risen Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and they don't recognize him. And I think he says right around that time to the professor and the writer something like, do you see, or something like that. Like basically this idea of being open to the divine in some way, and the fear and trembling that comes with that is what's in the room. It's not like, I want pizza every day for the rest of my life for free. That's not what the room is giving. It may give freedom, but what's going to come first is some sort of honesty, humility, confession, submission. And that's what's terrifying. So, yeah, and all that is to say is I don't think this is a tract in any way, but just piecing together, I think that's what the Stalker is suggesting without explicitly explaining to them. And then you throw in, so what does it mean that the professor is essentially there to blow the room up? That's a whole nother thread we could talk about as well, that he sees this as, I think his excuse is that this is too powerful for anyone to have.
Right.
So he wants to destroy it. Now, how does that apply to what I've been talking about? I don't know. I still have plenty more questions, but that was how I sort of started to wrap my mind around the room.
The ending in terms of the glass of water with the daughter, I do want to say a couple things struck me. First of all, entirely appropriate that this key moment, the end of the film, that it would culminate with a glass of water being Tarkovsky, not only because of the place water holds in this movie, but the place water imagery holds in all of the films we've seen in this marathon and films we've seen outside of this marathon. But also the beginning of this film is a shot of a glass of water shaking as that train goes by. It's almost as if it's going to tremble enough that it might fall off the edge, and it never does. And then we come around to the end. It feels like a callback to that moment, not a direct callback, but a close enough callback. What I thought of, Josh, more specifically, more pointedly, is what the writer says earlier in the film, what you're referencing. He's bemoaning, and this is ironic in a way because he's not the scientist. He's not the professor. He's the writer. And I know ultimately he's wishing that there was more metaphysical aspects to the universe and that there was something more profound that we could all experience. But what he's saying is something a scientist would say. The world is absolute. We're governed by laws.
Yeah.
It's ironclad.
Yeah,
and
cast iron laws.
That's ultimately what he's upset about. And that moment seems like, and I think this supports exactly what you were saying in your reading, but it's a direct rebuke of that. At the end of this movie, it's Tarkovsky's way of saying, not so fast. We don't live in a world that is as immutable in terms of its laws as you think it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, it's like what I love about his films is that it's suggesting that. It's more saying, yeah, but what if this? And then showing us something visual that makes us ask that same thing. We've talked about like the wind, the use of the wind in Mirror and the water as well. And then here, there are a couple of instances, I've talked about Tarkovsky as being more sorcerer or conjurer than film director. And we have a couple of instances of that here which connect to what you're saying. They're hints of those moving glasses to come. This is again when they first enter the zone and they're on a hill overlooking it. The railroad track is still there. They're kind of in darkness. It's foggy. And then the sun pierces through the fog and seems to anoint them. There's even a flare on the lens. And then the fog returns and it fades away. Like they couldn't have planned for that. They could not have planned for that.
Yeah.
Like the camera was just there and it's exquisite. There's a shot when they're closer to the room, this well, and the camera is looking down on it and there's these ripples of dark water sort of undulating in mesmerizing ways. And how about that shot? I wonder if you caught this, or maybe I was just, getting dizzy at this point. There's a shot of a dry riverbed at one point in the zone. And I could have sworn the lower half of the frame of the dirt was almost undulating in a weird way. And then at the end of this shot, again, had to be unplanned, this little dust devil just forms and blows around and then disappears. These are like the conjuring sorcerer moments that Tarkovsky seems to somehow either find or create, but I think they're hints of what you're talking about. They're just saying, yeah, we know the laws of science and we follow them and believe them, but what's this? What is going on here?
So 2 other quick points. Something of a thesis statement, I think, is said, and it's informed, for me, by his thesis film, which we saw at the beginning of this marathon, the steamroller and the violin. We have here a character called the professor, a character called the writer. I think it's one of the strengths of this film that they are not reduced to just allegorical figures. They have their own frailties and insecurities, and they are individuals. And I don't think they just represent sort of the fields that they come from. But nevertheless, there is very clearly a major allegorical element at play with this film.
Sure.
As we're talking about, what does the room represent, right? What does the zone represent? And at one point, I think it is the Stalker who says, or it's actually in a voiceover, it's him in a voiceover, he says, "For softness is great and strength is worthless. That which has become hard shall not triumph." And maybe I'm taking it too literally. This is a film that, you do that at your own risk. But I go back to a film, another allegorical film like The Steamroller and the Violin, a movie that's very much about saying, yes, we live in a world where we need people doing tough jobs like running this steamroller, and there are battles to be fought and soldiers that have to fight them. And it's a brutal, tough experience for all of us. But that's why we need beauty, and we need kids who play the violin. And this seems to be one of those things that is constantly warring in Tarkovsky as well. This recognition of the brutality of the world, but also that need, as we've discussed with other films, that need for beauty. And it's almost like with this voiceover, Josh, it's as if Tarkovsky is trying to usher it into reality. He wants to make it a reality that everyone understands, that we need to embrace softness. We need to abandon the notion that being hard, that strength, that might is the only thing that we should aspire to.
Yeah, I love the callback to Steamroller and the Violin. That makes sense. I hadn't thought of that. And I think that monologue, which I just love, is also related to this idea of surrender at the foot of the room, because, you would not do that if you want to be in a position of strength. That is a position of softness. And I think that's, a thesis statement for the film, and also an argument for the professor and the writer. Like, if you really want to go and do this, this is the posture you need to adopt, not go in there and ask to be the strongest man in the world, but to become the weakest,
right,
essentially.
Right. At the end of this film, can I ask you a theological question? Can we end here?
Okay.
Because this kind of confused me. At the end of the film, when he's returned and he's exhausted and his wife is tending to him, he's talking about the intelligentsia. He's really just being highly critical of modernity.
Yeah, he's going off at this point.
He's angry at the modern condition, right? Everything that everybody day to day is aspiring to, their lack of faith. They're putting all of their hopes in materialism, in things that may satisfy them in the short term, but not potentially in the long term. And he's saying, really, even though he's not thinking about it in these exact terms, he is talking about it as if without people who have faith, if this continues, he doesn't have a job. There aren't people who are willing then to venture into the zone anymore. People won't be seeking out the room, right? Because no one will have the faith to go there. They'll need more proof. They'll need more evidence, whatever the case may be. But in that conversation, Josh, where he talks about the unhappy and why people go there, my thought is, forget faith. As long as there are people who are unhappy, won't there always be a need to go to the room? And won't there always be unhappy people?
Yes.
So why won't he have a job?
Oh, okay.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know about sort of, the logistics of that. As you're describing him, though, I think in his mind, he's God's fool. He's a holy fool. Those are also terms to describe like prophets, right? So I think he sees himself as a prophet where it's single-minded. He's going to seem illogical, but he is there to, in a sense, it's like Old Testament Holy of Holies. And he is this prophet who has access to it. And he's being this conduit between the divine and regular people. Mm-hmm. And for him, everything else probably is extraneous. Everything else in the world is extraneous. This is his purpose. This is why he's been put on this earth. And in terms of modernity, yeah, I think that part you're talking about, he says something like their capacity for faith has atrophied. Right. And I think that's what concerns him, is not so much that whether or not he has a job, but that these are lost people.
Yeah. And to be clear, it's not about the job. It's about what we were referring to in the opening scene. This is his calling.
His calling, sure, absolutely.
If there aren't people who are willing to venture into the zone and go to the room, he can't fulfill his calling, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, but won't there always be people who feel that need to go? Because there will always be unhappy people. Won't there always be lost, desperate souls?
Maybe he's referring to, the willingness to address that unhappiness by seeking the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Lord knows there's a million ways to address that unhappiness, which a lot of those ways lead to more unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
And he may feel like here's a difficult way, a challenging way, a surrendering way, but it's a way that can actually bring hope and comfort. And so what he's bemoaning there is that he believes he has a way to address it. And by negating that, denying that it's even a possibility, that's the tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tragedy for him. Maybe.
Yeah, I can see that.
So wait, now I'm going to throw you a quick question. What's with the dog? Was that, and maybe a listener will help us, because a listener was kind enough to help us with the horses at the end of Andrei Rublev.
Yeah.
I forget their name, but had a very thoughtful, reasonable explanation that, these peaceful horses that are the last shot are a counter to the horses in physical strife we saw throughout the film, which I think made a lot of sense. But there's this dog that appears in the zone, and I guess the stalker takes home with him. But the dog also seems to appear in visions.
Right.
I don't know. I got nothing on that.
Well, all I got is I like the touch that the dog being there at the end does at least signal that everything we saw before it actually happened.
Okay.
Right. There's a world where
there's a link. Yeah.
We don't know how much of this is potentially in someone's head. Is it a fever dream? How long has he been gone? We still don't really know how long they've been gone, but we do at least know that they were gone and they somehow got back because the dog's there.
That helps.
Right?
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Well, Stalker is currently streaming on the Criterion Channel and on Max. It's also available VOD. Next week, the final film in our Tarkovsky Marathon, 1983's Nostalgia. That one is available VOD on most platforms. More about the marathon at filmspotting.net/marathons. If you have any comments about the show, we'd love to hear from you. Feedback at filmspotting.net. Josh, that is our show.
If you'd like to connect on social media, Adam and the show are on Instagram and Facebook and Letterboxd. He's at Filmspotting. You can find me in those places as Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You can listen early and ad-free. You'll get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus episodes, and access to the entire show archive. If you're looking for show t-shirts or other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
Available now, streaming in VOD, Deaf President Now. That's on Apple TV Plus, a documentary about a 1988 protest at a Washington, D.C. university that's the world's only university for the deaf and hard of hearing. Our friend Mariah Gates calls it a firebrand historical documentary that is as crowd-pleasing and informative as it is innovative and inclusive. It won the South by Southwest Audience Award. Out wide, Final Destination Bloodlines, the sixth in the series, but the first since 2011's The Not So Final Destination. I added the not so, Josh. Hurry up tomorrow. The Weekend is a musician plagued by insomnia pulled into an odyssey with a stranger, played by Jenna Ortega, who begins to unravel the very core of his existence. Sounds like Tarkovsky. Barry Keoghan stars. It's directed by Trey Edward Schultz, who made Krisha and Waves, and It Comes at Night. In limited release, this one seems to be getting some good buzz. Friendship, starring Tim Robinson as a suburban dad who falls hard for his charismatic new neighbor, played by Paul Rudd.
just saw this today and can add to the positive reviews, though I also have to give a warning. First off, this thing is really weird. I mean, I still don't know what the tone is, but it's committed to it and it at least has a firm control of it. The one warning I would give folks is it's way more a Tim Robinson movie than a Paul Rudd movie. So if you're a fan of the series, I think you should leave with Tim Robinson. You'll probably get a lot out of this. If you're going to it for, a lighthearted Paul Rudd buddy romp, not so much.
In addition to talking about Tarkovsky's nostalgia, next week we're going to get nostalgic with Richard Linklater's Before films. We will talk about Before Sunset as part of our Pantheon project, and we will share our Filmspotting Fest Q&A. Talking about Before Sunrise, I think we were kind of delirious that Sunday morning at the Music Box. Did we actually even capture this audio? We'll have to see.
Thank goodness Scott Tobias was there to carry most of the weight.
Yeah.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at WBEZ.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Filmspotting is listener supported. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com and get access to ad-free episodes, monthly bonus shows, our weekly newsletter, and for the first time, all in one place, the entire Filmspotting archive going back to 2005. That's at filmspottingfamily.com.